Imagine standing in the middle of a devastated city, skyscrapers reduced to twisted metal, the streets littered with wreckage, and an eerie silence hanging in the air. Then, a low, guttural growl rumbles through the ruins. The ground shakes beneath your feet. Something massive moves in the shadows, its glowing eyes locking onto you. In a heartbeat, it charges, a creature designed to be the ultimate apex predator, genetically engineered to hunt, kill, and dominate. This is what the Zervath Dominion had unleashed upon humanity, expecting nothing less than total annihilation. But what they failed to realize was that they had just given humanity the greatest challenge in its history. And humans? They thrive on challenges. For centuries, the Zervath had ruled through fear, deploying war beasts as living weapons of terror. These creatures were designed in the darkest depths of the Dominion's genetic laboratories, built from the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Each species had been perfected through ruthless experimentation, some with acid-spitting glands that could melt through metal, others with bones denser than steel, making them impervious to traditional firearms. Some could camouflage seamlessly into their surroundings, striking from the shadows like ghosts. Others were walking tanks, standing 3 stories tall with enough muscle to tear a dropship apart with their bare claws. Entire civilizations had collapsed under their rampages, and no species had ever found a way to stop them. Until now. Lethe Prime was chosen for extermination because of its strategic location, an isolated human colony on the fringes of explored space. It wasn't just an invasion, it was a test. The Dominion saw humanity as little more than a nuisance, an expanding species that could be dealt with swiftly. A full-scale military invasion would have been expensive and time-consuming, so the Zervath decided to do what had worked countless times before. Drop the war beasts, let them eradicate all resistance, and then move in once the slaughter was complete. It was a cold, calculated strategy. The first wave of creatures descended in massive drop pods, smashing into the ground like meteorites. As the armored capsules split open, nightmares emerged. The attack was swift, brutal. Entire districts were wiped out overnight. Survivors recounted stories of monsters tearing through entire battalions, shrugging off bullets and energy blasts like they were nothing. Cities became war zones, streets clogged with burning wreckage and the remains of those who hadn't escaped. In time, the Zervath observed from orbit, expecting the usual outcome. Humanity overwhelmed, screaming, dying in droves. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. The war beasts were dying at an alarming rate. More than that, they were disappearing. At first, Zervath intelligence dismissed the anomalies. Perhaps some of the beasts had turned on each other. It had happened before in previous deployments. But then the reports became impossible to ignore. Surveillance. Drones sent to observe the carnage never returned. Infrared scans revealed unsettling patterns. Entire packs of war beasts were being ambushed, hunted down systematically. Zervath commanders scoffed at the idea. No species had ever fought back successfully against the beasts. The warlords laughed, dismissing it as a delay, nothing more. But they weren't laughing for long. Humanity had learned fast. Unlike the civilizations before them, humans didn't scatter in terror. They adapted. In the beginning, they made mistakes. Traditional weaponry proved ineffective, their strategies too rigid. But humans are not predictable. They study, experiment, and evolve. Within days, military scientists were gathering data, analyzing patterns, testing weaknesses. When bullets failed, they switched to explosives. When explosives weren't enough, they turned to chemical warfare, industrial weaponry, even controlled demolitions to crush the beasts under falling skyscrapers. Civilians didn't just cower in fear. They fought back with whatever they had. Farmers turned grain silos into firebombs, trapping beasts inside before igniting them. Engineers constructed electrified barricades using city power grids, turning entire streets into kill zones. Every encounter became a lesson, every failure a step toward victory. And then, the real turning point came. Humans realized that not all of the war beasts were the same. Some were more aggressive, others more calculating. Some were purely instinct-driven, but a few were thinking. The beasts weren't just monsters. They had patterns, and more importantly, they had leaders. That's when humanity stopped simply fighting the war beasts. They started hunting them. At first, the Zervath were skeptical. Then they were confused. And finally, they were terrified. Their indestructible weapons of war weren't just being neutralized. They were being turned against them. Humans began capturing the creatures, dissecting their biology, hacking into their neural implants, and uncovering secrets that the Zervath had never intended to be known. With every captured war beast, humanity learned more. How they were bred, how they were controlled, and most importantly, how they could be repurposed. The Zervath warlords watched in horror as their mighty creatures, once the ultimate tools of conquest, were now being domesticated, trained, even augmented. The same predators that had torn through human cities were now fighting alongside human forces. Imagine the fear that must have gripped the Zervath when the very monsters they had created turned against them, not as mindless beasts, but as weapons in human hands. This was no longer a simple resistance. This was humanity's evolution in real time. And for the first time in Zervath history, the invaders realized they were the ones being outmatched. The Zervath Dominion had always believed in absolute control. Every species they had conquered had fallen in line, either through fear or through force. Their war beasts had never failed them, until now. Lethe Prime was supposed to be an easy extermination, a brutal but efficient method of wiping out resistance, before occupation. But now, the unthinkable had happened. Humanity had turned the tide, and the Zervath warlords, watching from their command ships in orbit, were panicking. The first sign that things had spiraled out of control came when their surveillance drones began vanishing. Normally, Dominion forces monitored their war beasts from orbit, tracking their movements in real time, recording the carnage as proof of victory. But now, entire sectors were going dark. When they sent reinforcements, more drop pods, more beasts, those too disappeared. It was as if something on the surface was swallowing them. Then, scattered reports started coming in, sightings of war beasts fighting alongside human forces. The very creatures that were meant to exterminate all life on Lethe Prime were now working against the Dominion. This was impossible. War beasts were genetically programmed for obedience, loyal only to their creators. The Dominion had ensured that no species could ever take control of them, but they had never accounted for human ingenuity. At first, humans fought in small, desperate skirmishes, using every ounce of their adaptability to survive. But then, something changed. Military specialists started capturing the war beasts instead of killing them. They began studying their genetic makeup, reverse engineering the Dominion's control systems, and testing new methods of rewiring their neural interfaces. The moment humanity realized that these creatures weren't just mindless killing machines, but could be hacked, reprogrammed, and controlled, the war was no longer about survival. It became about domination. The Zervath had designed the war beasts to be unstoppable, but their own arrogance had blinded them to a fatal flaw. They had given the beasts too much intelligence. In their effort to create the perfect biological weapons, they had unknowingly given some of them the capacity to learn. And now, under human guidance, they weren't just learning, they were adapting. The war beasts that turned against their masters. The first successful conversion was a turning point. A massive tank-like beast, covered in organic armor, had been captured after a brutal battle. Instead of killing it, human scientists sedated it, brought it to a hidden facility, and began testing its neurological implants. What they discovered was groundbreaking. The Dominion had relied on biomechanical implants to keep the beasts obedient. These implants emitted a constant signal that reinforced loyalty and suppressed independent thought. But once humans hacked the signal and overrode the frequency, everything changed. The beast's rage had once been directed at humanity, but now it saw the Zervath as the enemy, and it wasn't alone. One by one, more war beasts were either captured or lured into traps, their implants rewired, their allegiances flipped. Some were enhanced with cybernetic modifications, exoskeletal plating reinforced with human engineering, neural pathways reprogrammed for strategic coordination. Humanity had turned these monsters into soldiers, the Zervath's greatest weapons, were no longer theirs to command. The horror in the skies at first. The Zervath warlords refused to believe it. But when the first footage leaked from their own surveillance feeds, reality set in. The war beasts, creatures that had once butchered human forces without mercy, were now storming Zervath forward operating bases, not as mindless attackers, but as part of a coordinated strike force. These weren't random uprisings. These were military operations, planned and executed with terrifying efficiency. Then came the final blow, the first recorded instance of a war beast piloting a Zervath dropship. No one had thought it possible. The beasts were organic weapons, not strategists. But under human control, they had learned more than just how to fight. They had learned how to fly, how to use enemy weapons, how to manipulate Dominion technology. Zervath soldiers, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves hunted, ambushed in the very bases they had established, their own war beasts charging at them with terrifying precision. The Zervath High Command was in full crisis mode. Their invasion had not just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. The Dominion had never lost a planet to a war beast uprising before. But Lethe Prime wasn't just any planet. It was a human colony, and humanity had rewritten the rules of war. Realizing the catastrophic mistake they had made, the Zervath finally made a desperate decision: purge the planet. The fleet positioned itself for planetary bombardment. If they couldn't control Lethe Prime, they would destroy it. Entire divisions of warships powered up their main weapons, ready to erase all traces of their failure. But the humans had been expecting this. Even as the Dominion prepared to rain fire from orbit, human hackers, having already cracked Dominion technology, managed to infiltrate the enemy's command network. They hijacked targeting systems, sent false orders, and turned Dominion warships against each other. Friendly ships opened fire on one another, sowing chaos within the fleet. The mighty Zervath Armada, once an unstoppable force, was now tearing itself apart. And then, Lethe Prime launched its counterattack. Human-piloted Dominion warships, captured during the uprising, took off from the planet's surface. Accompanied by swarms of cybernetically enhanced war beasts in drop pods, they stormed the Zervath fleet. The very monsters that were meant to ensure humanity's destruction had now become humanity's vanguard. What followed was the most humiliating defeat in Zervath history. Their own creatures, their own weapons, their own ships, all of it was turned against them. The Zervath warlords, once so confident in their strategy, now watched in horror as their fleet was shattered. The few survivors who managed to escape had only one message to bring back to the Dominion's homeworld. We should have never gone to war with humans. And the worst part? This was only the beginning. The war on Lethe Prime was supposed to be an overwhelming show of Zervath dominance, a swift and brutal extermination of a rebellious species. Instead, it became the greatest military disaster in Dominion history. What started as a planetary invasion had now escalated into a full-scale insurgency, one that was spreading beyond Lethe Prime. The surviving Zervath warlords had barely managed to retreat, their fleets shattered, their war beasts turned against them. But the real nightmare was just beginning. Because humanity wasn't satisfied with just defending itself. The Zervath had made two fatal mistakes. The first was underestimating human adaptability. The second, leaving survivors. The birth of the beast legions with Lethe Prime secured, humanity wasted no time in capitalizing on its new assets. They had done the unthinkable, taken the most feared bioweapons in the galaxy and made them their own. But this wasn't just about repurposing Zervath war beasts for planetary defense. No. Humanity had bigger plans. Genetic scientists, military, engineers, and AI specialists worked tirelessly to refine and enhance their new biological army. They weren't just rewiring the creatures' neural interfaces anymore. They were breeding new generations, selecting for intelligence, combat efficiency, and loyalty to their new human masters. The first experiments were crude, simply reinforcing human command over existing war beasts. But as their understanding grew, so did their ambitions. The most successful war beasts were cloned and enhanced, merging Zervath bioengineering with human cybernetic technology. The result? A new breed of warrior, one that combined the brute force of the Dominion's creations with the tactical brilliance of human military strategy. They called them the Beast Legions. These weren't mindless monsters anymore. They were organized. They communicated using encrypted human command networks. They coordinated with human troops, utilizing urban warfare tactics, stealth, and guerrilla strategies that the Zervath had never seen before. The Dominion had unleashed these creatures upon humanity as an act of terror. But now, these same creatures were marching in formation, bearing human insignias, fighting as soldiers of a new kind of army. And they weren't staying on Lethe Prime. The counter-invasion begins humanity had reverse-engineered Zervath technology at a frightening speed. The Dominion had spent centuries refining their war machines, crafting biological weapons that no civilization had ever been able to resist. Yet within months, human scientists had unraveled secrets that should have been beyond their understanding. This wasn't just about war beasts anymore. Humanity had cracked Zervath fleet technology, learned to pilot their ships, and more importantly, found a way to disable the Dominion's planetary defenses. The next step was obvious. Human-led. Beast Legions, accompanied by captured Zervath warships, launched their first counteroffensive. The target? A Zervath-controlled planet, one that had been supplying war beasts to the Dominion for decades. It was supposed to be a fortress world, heavily defended, with vast breeding facilities that ensured a constant supply of war beasts for future conquests. But when the first human-led assault force arrived, nothing went as the Zervath had expected. The first wave wasn't human soldiers. It was war beasts. But these war beasts weren't loyal to the Dominion anymore. The defenders watched in horror as massive cybernetically enhanced creatures, some of them the very same monsters they had once trained, stormed their defenses. Towering behemoths outfitted with human-engineered armor plating, their neural interfaces feeding them real-time battle strategies, ripped through enemy fortifications. Zervath soldiers, once accustomed to commanding these creatures with absolute authority, were now being hunted by them. And then, the humans landed, equipped with captured Zervath weapons. Leading their monstrous new allies, human special forces overran the planet in days. The Dominion's greatest strength, its ability to wage war through biological supremacy, had been turned into humanity's ultimate weapon. The fall of the first Zervath-controlled planet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. This wasn't just a battle lost. This was the first sign that the Dominion's entire war doctrine had been shattered. The Zervath had believed in their military superiority for centuries. But now, their own war beasts were marching under human banners. The galaxy was beginning to realize a terrifying truth. The Zervath hadn't just failed to conquer humanity. They had created their own worst nightmare. The horror spreads as more and more Zervath-controlled worlds fell. Panic spread through the Dominion's ruling class. These weren't just battles. They were massacres. Their war beasts, once the ultimate weapons of conquest, had now become an unstoppable force of destruction, and they were fully under human control. Entire fleets were lost. Worlds that had stood for centuries were reduced to smoking ruins. The Zervath had always relied on war beasts to keep order, to ensure that their enemies never revolted. Now, those same creatures were leading the revolts. But the worst part? Humanity was only getting started. With every battle, the Beast Legions grew stronger. Human engineers refined their designs, creating war beasts specifically tailored for different battlefields. Some were genetically modified for space combat, outfitted with biomechanical armor that allowed them to survive in vacuum. Others were designed for infiltration, capable of mimicking Zervath command signals to infiltrate bases before tearing them apart from the inside. The Zervath had created war beasts as mindless weapons of destruction. Humans had turned them into something far more dangerous. The war was no longer about simple survival. It was about erasing the Dominion itself. One Zervath High Commander, before being executed by human-led forces, was reported to have uttered his final words in absolute horror. "We thought they were prey, but we were the ones being hunted and," as the first human war fleets, accompanied by entire battalions of cybernetic war beasts, set course for the Zervath homeworld. One thing was certain. The age of the Zervath Dominion was over. The age of humanity had begun. The Zervath Dominion was in freefall, The beasts they had bred, refined, and unleashed upon countless civilizations had turned against them. Worse, their greatest biological war assets were now being commanded by humans, an enemy they had underestimated from the very beginning. Entire fortress worlds had fallen. Shurvath-controlled sectors were being overrun. The very foundation of their empire, fear and absolute control through superior bioweapons, had collapsed. But even in the face of obliteration, the Zervath weren't ready to surrender. If their empire was to fall, they would make sure humanity suffered alongside them. And so, they prepared one final desperate counterattack, a plan that would decide the fate of the entire galaxy. The final gambit, Extinction Protocol. The Dominion's last surviving warlords gathered in secret, deep within the fortified bunkers of their homeworld, Zervath Prime. Their fleets were shattered, their armies in disarray, but they still had one last option. The Zervath had spent centuries creating war beasts to conquer worlds, but buried deep within their archives was something even deadlier, a bioweapon so extreme, even their own leadership had forbidden its use. It was not designed for war, but for annihilation. Codenamed Extinction Protocol, this classified project had been an absolute last resort, a genetic doomsday weapon designed to wipe out any species deemed too dangerous to be allowed to exist. It was a self-replicating biophage, an engineered plague that could erase humanity from the galaxy within weeks. Unlike war beasts, which could be controlled, this plague was unstoppable. Once unleashed, it would infect every human it came into contact with, mutating and adapting to overcome any medical countermeasures. The Zervath had no illusions about their own survival. By releasing this weapon, they would ensure the complete extinction of humanity, even if it meant sacrificing their own empire in the process. The plan was simple. A fleet of automated bioweapon carriers would be sent to every major human-controlled world, each loaded with enough of the biophage to cover an entire planet within days. If the war beasts had failed to subjugate humanity, then humanity would simply cease to exist. The human response: a race against time. By the time human intelligence operatives intercepted communications about the Extinction Protocol, it was almost too late. The Zervath had already launched their doomsday fleet, and the biophage was set to be dispersed across every major human colony. Panic spread through the United Human Defense Command. Military leaders and scientists scrambled for a solution, knowing that even a single ship reaching its target could doom their entire species. But humanity had come too far, fought too hard, to fall now. With no time to spare, human commanders made a bold and reckless decision. They would launch a direct assault on Zervath Prime, not just to destroy the Dominion, but to find and eliminate the source of the biophage, before it could spread. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. Either they ended the war in one final strike, or humanity was finished. The invasion of Zervath Prime, it was the largest military offensive in human history. Hundreds of captured Zervath warships, now fully under human command, jumped into orbit over the Dominion's homeworld. Behind them, entire legions of human-led war beasts prepared to descend upon the most fortified planet in the galaxy. The Zervath, even in their desperation, had not expected this. They had assumed humanity would be too focused on defending its own worlds. Instead, the humans had brought the war directly to them. Zervath Prime's defenses were immense, built to repel any invasion. But the Dominion had never faced an enemy like this. They were used to conquering weak, unprepared civilizations, not fighting an army that had turned their own weapons against them. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The first wave of the invasion was led not by human soldiers, but by the beast legions, cybernetically enhanced war beasts, bred and trained for planetary assault, ripped through Zervath defensive lines like unstoppable juggernauts. Gigantic bio-titans, now outfitted with human-engineered armor and weaponry, plowed through enemy fortifications, smashing through plasma barricades and tearing apart Zervath war machines. But the true shock came when human special forces units infiltrated the Dominion's central command centers, with biologically modified war beasts acting as their personal shock troopers. The Zervath defenders, who had spent centuries commanding these creatures, now found themselves hunted and slaughtered by their own creations. It was a total reversal of everything the Dominion had ever known. For the first time in their history, they were the ones running. The fall of the Zervath Dominion as human forces pushed deeper into Zervath Prime. The true objective became clear. They needed to reach the biophage core, the facility where Extinction Protocol had been developed. If they could destroy it, they could prevent the spread of the deadly virus before it was too late. The Zervath fought savagely, knowing that their entire species was at stake, but no amount of resistance could stop what was coming. The final battle took place deep within the Dominion's central research facility. Elite human strike teams, guided by advanced AI battle algorithms, breached the heavily fortified compound. As they fought through the corridors, genetic containment labs were destroyed, biophage samples incinerated, and Dominion scientists executed. Finally, the main reactor was rigged to detonate. The entire facility, along with every trace of the Extinction Protocol, was reduced to molten slag. The Zervath's last hope of victory was gone. With their homeworld in flames and their greatest weapon erased from existence, the surviving Zervath warlords surrendered unconditionally. The Dominion, which had once ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, was no more. Humanity had not only survived, it had emerged victorious. The Age of Humanity begins with the war over. Humanity stood at the precipice of a new era. The Beast Legions, now fully integrated into human military forces, became the cornerstone of a new interstellar order. No longer were war beasts simply tools of destruction. They were weapons of peace, ensuring that no species would ever attempt to enslave humanity again. Former Dominion worlds, freed from Zervath control, swore allegiance to humanity, recognizing them as the new dominant force in the galaxy. And as the first human-led fleets set out to explore the unknown, one truth became clear. Dropping war beasts on a human planet was the worst mistake the galaxy had ever made. Because now, humanity ruled the stars. The war was over. The Zervath Dominion, once the most feared empire in the galaxy, had collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. Their war beasts, their greatest weapons, had been turned against them. The biophage, Extinction Protocol, their last-ditch effort to erase humanity, had been obliterated before it could be unleashed. Humanity had won. But victory wasn't just about survival, it was about what came next. Because with the Zervath gone, the power vacuum left behind would shape the future of the galaxy, and humanity's role within it. The aftermath. Cleaning up the war beasts, even. With the Dominion shattered, the war beasts remained. Across hundreds of planets, Zervath-bred war creatures still roamed freely, many of them having gone feral after the fall of their handlers. Some had even started to evolve, adapting to their new environments and growing even more dangerous. It wasn't enough to defeat the Zervath. Humanity needed to reclaim the galaxy from the chaos they had left behind. And so, the largest coordinated, military operation in human history began, one that had nothing to do with war, and everything to do with control. Using their hard-earned knowledge of war beast biology, human engineers and geneticists developed new methods to neutralize, repurpose, or integrate these creatures into a stable galactic order. Some beasts, those that still carried their genetic loyalty programming, were incorporated into human planetary defense forces. Others were engineered into symbiotic species, designed to work alongside human civilizations, but some were simply too dangerous to coexist with anything. On planets where war beasts had become an apex threat, the only solution was eradication. Human-led beast hunting units, equipped with next-generation weaponry, specialized AI-driven combat suits, launched coordinated offensives to wipe out rogue war beast populations before they could spread unchecked. The process took years, but by the time the last rogue war beast was hunted down, humanity had cemented its role as the new galactic superpower. The Zervath war crimes trials. But there was one last chapter left to close. Not every Zervath had perished in the war. Some had survived. Warlords, geneticists, high-ranking Dominion officials. They had either surrendered or gone into hiding after their empire collapsed. Humanity was not about to let them escape justice. A new tribunal, the Interstellar War Crimes Council, was established, led by human judges and representatives from the liberated worlds. The surviving Zervath leaders and scientists were hunted down, dragged out of their hiding places, and put on trial for crimes against sentient life. The verdicts were swift and unforgiving. The warlords, those who had ordered the enslavement and extermination of entire civilizations, were executed. The scientists who had bred the war beasts, engineered the biophage, and experimented on countless beings, tried, convicted, and sentenced to exile on dead, barren worlds. The galaxy had suffered for centuries under Zervath rule. Humanity made sure there would be no second chance for them. The rise of the human galactic order. With the Zervath dominion gone, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. The former Zervath-controlled worlds, once held in submission, through fear, had a choice to make. Would they attempt to rebuild on their own? Or would they recognize the undeniable reality that had emerged from the war? Humanity was now the dominant force in the galaxy, not through conquest, but through proven strength. One by one, liberated civilizations swore allegiance to humanity, not out of fear, but out of trust. Because unlike the Zervath, humanity did not seek to enslave. They had fought to survive. They had turned the tide of war against all odds. And in doing so, they had earned the right to lead the galaxy into a new era. This was no longer the age of the Zervath dominion. This was the dawn of the human galactic order. The final lesson, a warning to the future historians would later argue about the true turning point of the war. Was it the capture and reprogramming of the war beasts? The defeat of the Zervath homeworld? Or the destruction of the biophage? But the real lesson, the true mistake that doomed the Zervath, was far simpler. They had assumed that humans were weak. They had believed that brute force would break them, that a few monsters, dropped on their worlds, would make them surrender. But instead, humanity adapted, humanity evolved, humanity became stronger, and in the end, the biggest mistake in galactic history wasn't just dropping war beasts on a human planet, it was believing that humanity wouldn't fight back. Because now, humanity wasn't just surviving, they were ruling the stars,